To end his first week as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak has visited Croydon University Hospital and taken TV cameras with him. One patient used the opportunity to tell Rishi some hard truths.
And they've looked after you really nicely?
Yeah, they always do.
Yeah.
It's a pity you don't pay them more.
Well, we are trying. No,
you're not trying. You need to try harder.
Right, I will take that away. Yeah. They are a very nice team there, aren't they?
They are, but it's important because they do very hard work.
They do very good work, yeah.
That patient challenged Sunak on nurses' pay. On the same day, a new report proved her point. The consultancy London Economics found that senior nurses now get paid 20% less than they did in 2010. The median wage for all nurses is 6% lower than it was when the Tories entered power. So this graph here shows how wages for nurses have changed since 2010 by year. So nurses are the red line. You can see by 2018, their pay had fallen by a whopping 10%. It has since recovered slightly, but it is still way below the 2010 figure. The blue line on this graph shows how this compares to private sector pay over the period. As you can see, the median pay for all professions in the private sector has fallen, but only by 3%, which goes a long way to explaining why many nurses have quit their jobs to work in better paid sectors. So you want to know why we have a crisis in the NHS? That graph will basically show you. You pay people terrible wages, you cut their pay. Obviously, it's appalling that pay has fallen in all different sectors, but if it's fallen less in other sectors, then people are going to leave nursing and work elsewhere because this is a very, very high-stress job, often a thankless task, and you're not getting paid enough to do it. Nurses, along with other NHS staff, have also been offered another real terms pay cut next year. In England and Wales, staff have been given an average of 4.75% more, with a bit extra for the lowest paid. The RPI measure of inflation currently stands at 12%. So that means that's a real terms pay cut, and quite a big one, actually, as you can see, as you've just seen, after a 6% cut over a decade, more if you are a senior nurse. NHS staff are currently being balloted to go on strike. Aaron, your comments on this story. I mean, often NHS crisis is talked about in quite abstract terms. Oh, it's such a complex system. There's inefficiencies here. There's savings that can be made there. We need to bring in new IT systems, et cetera, et cetera. Is the big story over the past 12 years that the reason we have an NHS crisis is because we don't pay doctors and nurses enough, and so they left the profession?
I think that's absolutely spot on, Michael. And I actually think it's that, and there's also the fact that there's too much outsourcing. And there's too much disconnection. So, for instance, you have, appointment processes for GPs in a certain area, being outsourced to a certain company. I don't really see the value in it. And actually, it's making the NHS a more dysfunctional organisation, not a better one. So, I think you have to start with that. Look, healthcare and just care generally, social care, are incredibly labour intensive. It's not like automotive manufacturing. It's not like farming, right? Food production is a better word for it. It is incredibly labor intensive, and it's going to remain labor intensive. We can talk about AI and automation till the cows come home, but these will be very labor intensive industries for a very long time. So the idea that we can just change it with technology or with some new app or with, yes, of course, a liquid biopsy where you can detect early stage cancer more cheaply, more efficiently than ever before. Fantastic. Should be a game changer in healthcare services. But fundamentally, most of the costs in that industry, more so in elderly care, but across healthcare, most of the costs are going into your workforce. It's a hugely, hugely labor-intensive industry. So you're absolutely right, Michael. If you care about the outcomes, you need to have the best people paid what they're worth. And like you say, keeping people there is hugely important. If you have children or you want children, the profession of a pediatric nurse, hugely, hugely important. Yet we've got right-wing newspapers in this country talking about the birth rates falling. Why are people having children? And they want people who study to be pediatric nurses to be on less than somebody stacking shelves at Lidl. By the way, I think they should both be on more money, and they're both socially necessary jobs. Food logistics is hugely important. But my God, Michael, we're paying people who study to raise healthy children, we're paying them next to nothing. It's unbelievable. And so I think I look at that, how much is paid to like I said, pediatric nurse, good example. And then people say, the country's not working. Well, yeah, because you have people like, the chief execs at Royal Mail or the bloody, the half dozen private rail operators in this country, or the water companies. My God, Michael, as a CEO of one of the water companies in this country, in the last 2 years, she took £9 million home. And then you've got nurses who can barely make ends meet and can't feed themselves at the end of the month. That is not an exaggeration. There's a social justice argument there. But like you say, equally importantly, I think, is if you want a functioning NHS, you need to start paying these people properly, because they're not going to join the industry. What are the incentives when they're paid so badly? And they're not going to stay there once they are there if actually they're seeing their friends and their family and their former co-workers going elsewhere, like I say, into retail or supermarkets and making more money. It's absurd. It can't continue. I think for me, that is one of those stories when you see, the pay that nurses are on in this country, for instance. It's one of those stories you think, wow, we really are screwed. We really are screwed. We are not preparing for the future. The 2020s are going to be an incredibly difficult decade for a bunch of reasons, right? Energy security, rising inequality, geopolitics, climate change. And our political elite are asleep at the wheel. It's extraordinary. How the hell do you think you can run a national health service and not pay people basic money is jaw-dropping for me. Where I sort of think about Rishi Sunak and all this, if he has a brain as somebody seeking re-election, he will have to do something about NHS pay. He will have to. Jury's still out, of course.
And it's worth saying, the same argument or a similar argument could be made basically for any public service. We've had public sector pay freezes or the like kind of ever since 2010. Not completely frozen, but I think in nearly every section of the public sector, wages are down since they were in 2010. I know in education, that's certainly the case. And so what do you have? You've got people who are ambitious. They want to get further in their career, get paid well. They move out of the industry. Or just anyone, if you've got people say, well, I've got kids, so I can't afford to be a nurse. What kind of society says you can't have kids and be a nurse because you don't get paid enough to be a nurse? It's completely bonkers. It's a terrible way to organise a society. It's no wonder that our public services are collapsing.